You remember that book when you were younger? That special story that reached inside your heart, still a part of you somewhere. Turning the pages on your favorite adventure in that sofa fort in the living room. That spooky story you read under the blankets with a flashlight. Was there something special about the stories you read as a child? Do the stories you read and write as an adult have the same magic? Is there a way for you to capture that lightning in your own writing? Okay, here we go. Welcome to the Epilogue, where everything makes sense in retrospect, hopefully. Today I am here with Lauren Wolk, the Scott Odell Award and Newbery Honor-winning author, Wolf Hollow, and Beyond the Bright Sea, as well as several other wonderful lyrical stories for middle grade readers like Echo Mountain and My Own Lightning. Many other awards, including the New England Book Award, Jane Addams Honor, and Carnegie Award. There's a list on her website. In fact, let's see, she's got a new one, just came out as well. Candle Island, I think, just dropped like a month ago.
April.
Something like that.
Yeah.
She's the go-to historical fiction writer for younger readers, I think, right now. So, Lauren, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us about story today.
Oh, my pleasure, Michael. I don't know a better way to spend my time.
You have a lot of stuff to talk about for middle grade, and that's really why I wanted to be here. But I just saw also on your website this Inkline project. I was wondering if you wanted to my voice just cracked. I was wondering if you wanted to talk about that.
Sure, absolutely, because it is connected with everything else I do, including writing novels. On December 16th, 2024, my very dear friend, Jackie Reeves, a brilliant visual artist who works here on Cape Cod, and I've known her for years, she sent me an email with a maybe 1-minute animation she'd created. Spontaneously, extemporaneously, no editing or anything else, and said, "Do you have a poem that might go with this?" And I didn't, so I wrote one, and I found some music, and we put it all together, and it sparked this incredible project we've been working on. We now have, I think, 30 of them done, and we were in the Provincetown Film Festival in June with a compilation of them. And the reason it's so important to me, and it fits in with our conversation today, is because writing these sort of quasi-poems without any real editing or revision of any kind, because that was the whole point, to be spontaneous, has led me into a whole new way of writing novels. I'm working on one right now where I am just trying very hard, even harder than I ever have, to block out the world and just focus on the words as they come in the most raw and unfiltered way possible. And it's freaking me out a little, frankly, but it's cool. We'll see what happens.
That's very nice. Is this also going to be for younger readers, or is this?
Yes.
Or we don't know yet.
No, this
kind of. Okay.
This is definitely a middle grade novel, and I guess I should call it a novel. It is a novel, but it's got shifting points of view, and it's got I don't know what it's doing, but I'm having fun.
Okay, everybody, get ready for the Ulysses of middle grade novels. You often write for younger readers, but you're not writing down to them. Your stories are complex, usually historical, strong characters, some honestly challenging topics and themes. Well, first of all, I'm going to back up. Let's familiarize some people with your work and give a summary of a couple of these. I'm going to be talking about Wolf Hollow, obviously, and Beyond the Bright Sea. Both of these take place between World Wars. Wolf Hollow, it's a little closer to the cusp of World War II, and Beyond the Bright Sea, right after World War I. They affect it in different ways. Wolf Hollow, which we're definitely going to talk about, is about, well, do you want to take it or do you want me? Yeah.
No, and in fact, you were talking about my writing for middle grade and having some complex storylines and heavy subjects. I wrote that book for adults, or at least I thought I did.
Mm.
Or I shouldn't say that. I wrote it not thinking about audience, certainly not thinking it would be for young people specifically. But when I finished, and of course it has a young protagonist, it's a coming of age story. It was inspired by my mother's childhood on the farm where she grew up and where I spent a lot of my childhood and my whole life. It was a tribute to her, that family, that time, that place. And I just wanted to write the story. When my agent
Mhm.
saw it, my agent at the time said, "Oh, this is middle grade." And I said, "You're out of
Mm.
your mind. You're out of your mind. It's very they're scary. It's scary. It's dark. It's sad." Not that I think those are inappropriate for kids, and we can talk more about that because I think it's very important that they read
Mhm.
such things. But at the time, I just wasn't seeing how this book was for that audience until he said, "Well, don't you remember when you were that age and you read a book that got into your bones forever and changed who you are and how you look at the world? Don't you want the chance to maybe be that to young
Mm.
people?" And I said, "Well, of course, there's nothing I would want more." And so anyway, it was published as a middle grade book, and I never looked back. And it turned out it's my sweet spot in more ways than one. I am a 10, 12-year-old girl inside, always have been. And so I'm just letting out my inner child and all the experiences of my life that have shaped me, combined with all the things I've imagined. Wolf Hollow, as much as it's a tribute to my mother and her childhood,
Mhm.
is very much a reflection of things that were also important to me, like the natural world, like family, like standing up to injustice, like dealing with bullies, like dealing with loss and grief and uncertainty, all the things that really flavored my childhood, flavor the childhood of this character of mine, Annabelle. It is during World War II. And so her life in this wonderful bucolic setting in Pennsylvania is really a microcosm of what's happening in the broader world because this evil bully comes out of nowhere
Mhm.
to change things forever, far, far for the worse. And it's interesting how the various characters respond to this
Mhm.
blonde-haired, blue-eyed monster who comes into their
Mhm.
midst. So that was my not knowing it, but this was my introduction to the world of literature for young people. And then I finished
Mhm.
Beyond the Bright Sea before Wolf Hollow was even out. And so I was
Mhm.
not influenced really by
Yeah.
audience or expectations. I had a wonderful time writing that. It takes place in the 30s on the Elizabeth Islands off the coast of Cape Cod, where I live. And it's about the difference between how people on Pennakees Island and people on Teddyhunt Island lived. And I don't want to give you any spoilers. So I will just say that the history of one island compared to the other and the legacy of those histories, the effect of those histories on the current residents of the islands is profound, especially on my protagonist, Crow, a young girl named Crow.
We try to warn before we give spoilers, or at least that's the idea. Sometimes when we're talking about specifics, it will come up, but feel free to tune out, everybody, whenever I tell you. Um, yeah, so that's very interesting that you had started out without age involved in it, and I think there's that's really true in a lot of ways of story in general that we give to these younger readers that they are able to accept from us, that the story is the story, and we might take different things from it because of our age,
Sorry, of course, as
but
because of our age, our
yeah.
experience, our background, our imagination, all of it.
So I know originally you wrote it without being targeted at middle grade, but even with the follow-up stories or with editing this, what kind of considerations did you feel that you had to make, if any, for the younger readers with this story?
Almost none. I am blessed with an incredible editor, Julie Strauss-Gable at Dutton at
Mhm.
Penguin Random House, who agreed with me that very little needed to change in that context. Very little. And I was grateful for that because I think sophisticated language, challenging language is
Mhm.
good for kids. I think we should not spoon feed them so much.
Mhm.
I learned my vocabulary by reading Jane Austen and other
Mhm.
books that challenged me. And so I don't think we should dump things down for them. And as far as subject
Mhm.
matter goes and character goes, story goes, I think that if we give young people examples of other young people, fictional, yes, but still hopefully who ring true, who face challenges with courage and intelligence and integrity and imagination, then we are doing them a great service because kids
Mhm.
today are facing enormous challenges. And if they don't have role models in the people, hopefully, around them, but also the characters around them, then I don't see how they stand up to what they need to face. I think it's incumbent upon anyone making art of any kind to tell the truth, their own truth, of course, which is somewhat
Mhm.
subjective. But if we don't do that, then what's the point? And so I tell the truth as I see it. And I think kids are perfectly capable of seeing that truth and deciding what they take from it, what they add to it, whether it becomes their own story or not, is up to them. So I don't think we pull punches. But so your question, do we have to change? Do we have to edit, revise because of a younger audience? No, no, we did not.
That is a lovely answer. The kids will rise to meet us. That's, I guess, the lesson here.
If,
Um,
if we let,
yeah,
if we,
if we let them,
yeah.
right. Tell them the story and um, let them live it just like any other reader. So,
I do,
um,
do want to say though that I don't think there's anything wrong with funny, lighthearted
mhm.
stories, fantasy, sci-fi,
Oh yeah.
romantasy. I love all that. I think a wide and varied diet of literary um,
Hmm.
th- things is wonderful. But I do think there's a place at the table for the serious.
Well, yeah, I think that it's actually something I was going to touch on was the literary genre, so called, or I don't think that it's fair a lot of times the way that people take, we'll say, a more plot focused story and put it in a different level or place than say a more introspective or setting focused story. That said, um, let's talk about the literariness and how does the lyrical language, the flowing passages. I mean, that's a balancing act with any story, regardless younger readers or whatever you put on the shelf. How do you add the lyrical descriptions, the setting, the that deep flowing language, the wordiness of the books that's kind of the anti Hemingway, if well, at least as far as Hemingway described Hemingway, without being too heavy?
Well,
Yeah.
that's a great question. And actually, I don't add those things. I start with those things. I start with setting always. I never know what the story will be. I don't even know who the characters are. I always start
Mhm.
setting the place I know really, really well on a sensory level and an emotional level, like the farm in Pennsylvania or the mountains of Maine or the islands off Cape Cod. And then I add a character who, just appears in my imagination and I get to know her the same way I get to know any human, which is a little bit at a time through her actions and her words and the relationship we develop together. And I can only write her story if she tells it to me, but also if I can, and I insist upon this, um, use the language I want to use. I
Mhm.
have to be immersed in the story as a writer if I expect people to be immersed in it as readers. And so I immerse myself by loving the process, loving the language, loving putting the right words in the right order. So although I may go back in a second or third draft and add or subtract things, and as I often do,
Mhm.
it is the craft that fuels the engine right from the first word. It's the craft. I never do an outline. I never just whip off a first draft that's story focused or plot focused. I never ever do that because it's no fun for me. It's no fun at
Right.
all. The writing well as I can is what drives me. So, and I get to discover the story as it unfolds, and I get to know the characters as they let me, and I get to be the reader and writer at the same time. And I get to experience all the emotions along the way. I get to be surprised. I get to be sad. I get to be happy. I get to laugh if it's funny. I get to be confused and scared. It's a roller coaster. It's not easy to write that way.
Mm.
No writing is easy, but it's the way I write, and I have to. So for kids, if I'm indulging in quite a lot of lyrical language at times, I'm also, and this is not deliberate, it just seems to be instinctive. I use a lot of dialogue. So there's a
Mhm.
balance between the heavy and the light, the slow and the fast. It just seems that whenever I have indulged my lyrical sensibilities, or whatever you want to call it, my attention to the words, then the whole thing tips, and I go sliding into a dialogue driven, much faster paced piece of storytelling for a while.
I have heard said quite a few places that if you don't enjoy the story that you're writing, why would anybody else enjoy reading it? Um, and there's people who get wrapped up in wanting to have written rather than writing. Like they want to have the book with their name on it rather than wanting to write the book. And that experience immersing, I've found myself too, whenever I've felt um, pressured or whatever for the story to come out, that just enjoying the process of writing just helps it kind of feel like it comes out better. So,
Mhm. Yep, of course. And I'm always telling young writers, fall writers, they'll ask, what's your best advice for someone who's just starting out? And I say, well, just write. I mean, and read everything you can get your hands on. Even the bad stuff will teach you stuff, what not to do. But if you're too worried about being an author, publishing
mhm.
a book, who's going to play the lead in the movie version, how much money you're going to make, how incredibly wonderful your life will be once you're a published author. If you focus on all that, you will be so distracted you won't be able to write the book that may, perhaps, earn you those things. And so it's kind of a vicious cycle. And for some reason, people really do romanticize the life of the author, the published author.
Yeah.
Perhaps because everybody wants an audience. Everyone wants their story to be heard. And that is a wonderful thing. But no one's going to hear your story or read your story if you're so consumed with how they feel about it. You need to know how you feel about it.
Um, well, speaking of the lyricism, your stories are about place as much as the plot or the characters. You seem to have just alluded to that yourself, and they're actually part of the story's theme as well, very strongly. So you're writing this historical fiction most of the time. They're not what we would usually consider always the big central historical moments on grandiose historical scales and these, shelf busters. The moments in your stories have kind of a timeless quality to them. They're often quiet places. I think history kind of flexes itself around them.
Mhm.
How do you choose these places?
They are always places that I know so well that they've been characters in my own life, the settings of my own
Mm.
life, and they've played an enormous role in my emotional development. I the other night I was lying in bed thinking about my grandmother, who was the matriarch on the family farm in Pennsylvania. I was thinking about her and about that farmhouse. She's long gone, so's my grandfather. I'll probably never go in that house again, although it's still in the family. But as I was lying there, the smell of Clorox and potatoes wafting up from the stone cellar where she did the wash and where we stored the root vegetables was so powerful in my memory that I started to weep. Clorox and potatoes. The setting is all about the sensory information that we have taken in over and over and over again in the course of spending time in such places, and the emotional impact those places have had on us and continue to have on us, like making us weep in the middle of the night out of the blue. If I know a place that well and I can recreate it on the page, then hopefully my readers, whether they've ever been in a stone cellar before or not, let alone a farm in Pennsylvania, will go there with me and feel
Mhm.
and sense that place in a way that my characters are doing. So, and like I said before, I want to be in that story. I want to be in those places again. I desperately want to revisit all the places that have meant so much to me. I don't necessarily have to spend years there. I could
Mhm.
probably write a book right now set in Scotland, where I've only been twice, because when I was there, I was all in. I mean, completely all in. My roots are in Scotland and other places, but I almost felt as if I had lived there before for
Mhm.
centuries. It was that strong a reaction. So it's not necessarily the amount of time; it's the connection.
That's probably what I'm feeling reading these as the timeless quality. It's you're writing these from yourself. Like this is it is a little bit unmoored in time and memory and stuff. So technique, guys, right from your, don't pick the place that you think is going to get you on the next vampire bestseller list. The um you you do have strong themes. They're they're strongly felt. They're not necessarily strongly applied, I'll say. Like I can feel that there's not always like necessarily a direct message. A lot of times there's questions that are left open, and it's about thinking about the thing rather than the message of the thing. And that's something that I think we typically feel for younger readers that there needs to be an answer, right? With theme or plot, whatever. Um, that's probably part of what has what we might consider a literary feel about your writing is this the thematic elements kind of woven through. Like these things are related in some ways, sometimes ineffably. That is, the blonde haired, blue eyed bully that's storming through the schoolyard, or um, the mysterious man who lands on an island and has some history that we won't always be told, and is very concerned with what is now, right? So, um, is it? I was going to ask this question from a standpoint of younger readers, but I think we've kind of discussed the fact that the younger readers are usually more mature than we give them credit for.
Yes, indeed.
But is there something about this that we need to be cognizant or thinking about the theme when we're writing to make sure that it's at least um, that we know what it is, maybe more so for younger readers, even if we don't know the answer.
Well, I have like 20 different answers to that question. One, I'm not fond of bully pulpits or preaching.
Right.
Uh, and if I were, I'd probably have to be a planner, a mapper, instead of a pantser, which is what I am, writing by the seat of my pants. Without a map, if there are themes in my stories, it's because they arise
Mhm.
spontaneously as the story unfolds, character driven. Um, uh, and as my character is facing a challenge and dealing with it in a particular way, the themes emerge. The blonde-haired, blue-eyed monster. I didn't know why she was so evil. I started
Mhm.
writing about a bully because I was bullied as a kid, and so was my mother. And I thought, well, this girl who's revealing herself as a bully to my protagonist Annabelle is a reflection of that. But she was so much worse than the bullies in my life or in my mother. She was so downright evil, and I couldn't understand why, but the more I wrote, the worse she got. And that's when I noticed that I had given her blonde hair and blue eyed. That's when I noticed that she was behaving the way Hitler was behaving across the ocean. That's when I noticed that she was doing to this
Mhm.
farm community what the Nazis were doing to Europe. It was not a deliberate, oh, I'm going to create this thing. Although on some level, subliminally, I may have known what I was doing. But once you recognize this theme emerging, once I recognize a theme emerging, if I'm happy enough with that and it suits the story and the characters, then I will develop it. And in a second draft, I will go back and make sure that from the first word up to the epiphany I had about theme, that I've done a good enough job of leading the way in. But I never sit down and say, I'm going to write a book about injustice, or I'm going to write a book about bullying, or somebody said, so you've written a book about PTSD. I said, what? I have not. And yet, my character Toby in Wolf Hollow is clearly suffering from that, and terribly, before we had applied a name to that. We used to
shell shock, or
right. So these are things that rise like bubbles in a pond as I'm swimming, and it's always fascinating to see what comes. But for kids, I'm not sure you have to have lessons or themes or cautionary tales, and especially in more lighthearted stories. And yet they do emerge. Try and think of a book for kids that does not have a lesson in it of some kind, even if it's just have fun. Don't spend your whole life worrying about the future. And, go read Captain Underpants, which I haven't read myself, but I know my kids got an enormous amount of enjoyment out of reading books like that. So I think, though, that the best ones are not preaching. They are simply following the lives of kids who are learning the world as they go.
Well, you mentioned like writing the path in, and I see that you're writing the path in, but you're not necessarily writing the path out.
Exactly. And I think you should leave kids with questions. I don't think you should tie off everything nice and tidy. Sorry, I hate the word should, and I shouldn't tell anyone else how to write. But for me, leaving things a little open to interpretation is good, because that's the way life is.
Yeah. Well, you don't explain everything plot-wise either. You leave some room for the kids, for your readers to figure things out. It's there in the story for them if they want to think about it. There are questions posed for the main characters, and plot elements. And speaking of maybe a bit of a spoiler, I'll try to be careful with Bright Sea, there's the story identity of someone that the main character is looking for. It's not explicitly answered. There's hints, and there could be considered strong hints, but it's also possible that those hints are not leading the place that you might think as a reader. The characters never reach that conclusion. So there is a tendency, I think, for a lot of writers, especially newer writers, to think that they have to wrap everything up, to answer everything. It's all just either happily ever after or everybody died. Your stories, I think, are some of the better examples that I might point a writer towards, to look at something where things are not always answered, but the story can still feel complete, or at least content with itself.
Yeah, I like that, the way you put that. People say, how do you know when a story's done? How do you know when you're finished, when a book's over? And that's a really hard one to answer, because I don't until it ends. It's just, it's a feeling, like the end of a piece of music. You can feel that the end is coming. And so maybe that therefore leads you to write as if it is truly ending. But that doesn't mean that everything gets wrapped up and tied off in a bow. Sometimes I've had to answer to thousands of kids who want to know desperately what happens after the end of Beyond the Bright Sea, or Echo Mountain, those two especially. And they have all these plans for a sequel. They have mapped it out exactly what's going to happen next, and how I should write the sequel, and which I'm not sure I'll ever do. But I always say to them, well, you're clearly a storyteller. I think you should go write the story you want to tell. And maybe someday I'll pick up the threads and continue weaving them. But I might not. And so you'll just have to decide in your imagination what happens after the end.
I imagine you get a lot of questions from the younger readers there.
Yeah.
And I think some of this is a reflection This is me kind of supposing an answer here, I guess, but some of this is a reflection of that interiority, like that it's not the plot events that happen that are the purpose of the story. It's where the character arrives at emotionally or in their own personal journey that is the end point of the story, whether the plot thingies have happened in the order that we suppose they should.
Right.
So, speaking of which, though, this is probably a little bit more practical. You tend to write standalone stories. You do have My Own Lightning. This is a sequel to Wolf Hollow, but as a standalone story, you're not taking the planned trilogy, quintilogy path that's popular among kind of starting out. What makes that decision for you as a writer?
It was interesting when I decided to write a sequel to Wolf Hollow. It was during the pandemic, and I think I just desperately wanted to return to a safe place where I wanted to spend time, which was the family farm, even though Wolf Hollow was a sad book. I really wanted to go back there and find out how Annabelle, my main character, was coping with the sorrow of her life at Wolf Hollow. How did it change her? What was she doing? How was she changed? How was she different? How was her life different? And I also, because we were all experiencing this bombardment of external forces, all of them negative and scary and debilitating during the pandemic, I wondered how she would react to yet another kind of bombshell in her life now that she has had some experience with the tragedy of her past. And so I went back to that place and that character and struck her with lightning in the first few pages because I've always been fascinated with what happens if somebody survives a lightning strike without being terribly injured. Sometimes they are changed forever in very interesting ways. So, although I write without a map and I don't really want to know what the story is, I did have that sort of idea because I was already starting with a character I knew really well. And so it was quite kind of natural, therefore, to look a little more closely at the beginnings of plot. I had the setting of the character, and so I just went straight into a summer storm, not knowing where it would lead me or her.
It's starting with an event, I guess, but again, you're not immersing yourself with plot. You're kind of exploring what happened back in this place with this event. I'm thinking of Paul Schrader talking about like problem, metaphor, plot, like the things. You have a problem that you're reaching for a metaphor, maybe not consciously, but you literally have a lightning strike jumping in here, and that leads to whatever story, if not plot.
Yeah, and for me, it's more a question of what if this girl
Yeah.
is hit by lightning? What if she wakes up changed? What if? And so I don't know the answers, but I can always ask the questions. I'll give you an example of how these things aren't linear. The book I have coming out next, which my editor is reading right now, so it's very early days yet. It'll be 2027. I was lying in bed one night. I often I'm in the shower, lying in bed, doing the dishes when I come up with ideas, and as most people do, and I just kept picturing this apple orchard. Just it would not leave my mind, and I've spent a lot of time in apple orchards, so I didn't know where in the world it was. It was just an apple orchard, and suddenly, after a few nights of thinking about this apple orchard and how it looked and how it smelled and the sound of the birds and all the rest, a girl appears. She's standing among the trees, and there's a dog with her. And she's looking into the woods on the far side of a stone wall at the edge of the orchard. And she sees something. She sees a flicker of movement in the bushes. That was it. I just stepped into the scene with her and started writing. And I won't tell you what that flicker was or how it changes her life because I didn't know at the time, and I know now, but I'm keeping that a secret. But it's all, that was the door opening. It may have just opened a crack, but I knew where,
Mhm.
I knew who, and I knew a little bit of what, just that flicker. And that's all I need to begin. Books don't always take. Maybe I write 20 pages and the flame goes out. That happens. But if I get too far ahead of myself and have too much of a plan, I'm bored. And so the
Mm.
flame never gets going in the first place. So I just, if I've written 20 pages and it turns out to be a non-starter, it was better than vacuuming. And, it's a better use of life than almost anything else I can think of. And it teaches me something every time I fail, or I shouldn't say fail, every time I let something go, I also take something with me.
That, I think, is wonderful advice for newer writers, especially, but in general. There is a strong tendency to not want to let go. You have this thing. It's precious. You worked on it. Being okay with walking away if it's not going to work. Maybe it'll work later,
Well,
but
I hate to interrupt,
yeah.
but you set that up perfectly. The book I'm working on right now was something I started 2 years ago and abandoned.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just going through my old files because I never actually throw anything away. And I
Right.
found this weird file. I thought, what is this? And it turned out to be the first 10 pages of this book. And I read them and immediately started writing the next lines. And I thought, okay, well, maybe I'll just write another 10 pages and abandon ship again. But what else have I got to do right now except, mow the lawn? So I just kept going and I'm up to page 55 or so. And I don't know if I'll finish. But
Mm-hmm.
it's like you get to know some people and you think you're going to be friends. And then after a while, you realize you don't have much in common. And you probably just see them once in a while in passing and you'll forget their name over time. And, that's the way it is sometimes too with stories. You see something in them that doesn't quite materialize.
See, that's a lovely writerly metaphor right there. So you have this technique that I have observed, this something that a lot of writers might have problems with, either because they're trying to do it wrong or because they're trying so hard not to do it. And that is you're zooming in and out. And maybe that's how you're exploring the story. But it's something that it's you're using this zooming in and out, this controlled zooming in and out with a narrative voice. You'll be in the scene with the narrator, with the plot, with the things that are happening, and then you pull back to a broader view of time, still in the narrator's voice, and kind of you use this for foreshadowing sometimes, and kind of dropping a flash forward version of a cliffhanger in a way. You use this in challenging moments to give kind of a comforting feel sometimes, or gives your narrator an additional dimension, something of a future history. It's a lot that it does. And maybe you, and I don't know how conscious you are of doing this, but you do it an awful lot. I was wondering if you might like to talk about it.
I don't do it consciously. I do very few things consciously, which it sounds a little cop out. Or I don't. I'm pretty much when it comes to writing an autodidact. I taught myself by reading a lot, and writing a lot. And the things that felt natural and good to me, I did more of. The more I did, the better I got at them. And the things I didn't like to do, I didn't do. And so I've never developed some skills that maybe I ought to have and would have had I gone to graduate school, or in other ways followed a path other than having kids and working in many, many different jobs for a living while I was writing on the side. So the point, I suppose, is that the things who was it? Aristotle who said the things we need to learn to do before we can do them, we learn to do by doing them, which is a very circular way of looking at things, but so true that doing the thing teaches us how to do the thing. And that's
Mhm.
very true for me with writing. Just trial and error, and discovery. It's a total act of discovery. When I sat down to write Wallow, it came out in the first person. I had never
Mhm.
written in the first person before. It just the first line, the year I turned 12, I learned how to lie. I was in the shower. This line pops into my head. I wrote it down, and the voice was so strong. I just kept that point of view. I have been writing in the first person ever since. It's
Mm.
just the way I write now after decades of writing in the third person.
Mhm.
I have, of course, when I was starting out and in college, I'd try different experiments, like writing from different perspectives, but not seriously. When I was on
Mhm.
my own writing after I left school, it was always third person. So I encourage people to try new things and see whether they take. And if they don't,
Mhm.
they don't. But first person for me was everything. So it's not very little of it is deliberate. These are
Mhm.
just happy accidents.
We love that. Thank you, Bob Ross, for bringing that in to us. I okay. I would encourage people who have been having troubles, especially with a first person narrator, looking at this kind of a thing. How do you? A lot of times, people, writers, feel like they have to be in a moment and just ride that moment through to the end of the book. Like you have to be always right there, very fixed in time, very fixed in the events. The whole show don't tell kind of pushes people into this. Yours is a great example of this with a first person narrator and using this in a way of a retrospective narrative and being able to zoom in and out on time. I think Little Fires Everywhere by Celeste Ng is a great example of doing that with multiple characters zooming in and out of different heads. And it's hard to do. People get scared of it. You're doing it, intuitively, but it really works well. And probably the parts that don't work get cut out anyway.
And of course, as the book develops, plot becomes more and more important because your
Of course.
storyline is unraveling in front of you and you're following the thread. And so your characters are also focused on what's happening in their lives and everything becomes more integrated, place, character, plot. And I get really excited because I want to find out what's going to happen.
Mhm.
But I am always attending to the voice of my protagonist. I'm always in her shoes, in her skin, looking at the world through her eyes. And if I try to make her do something that doesn't suit her,
Mhm.
I can feel it in my gut. And
Mhm.
she rebels too. So the plot never takes over. I hope it doesn't. At least it's my intention to
Mhm.
stay true to my protagonist and who she is, even as she's changing. Her
Mhm.
The way she changes has to be appropriate to who she is.
I think that's something that maybe everybody writing who's having trouble with writing the way that you think you're supposed to write, maybe take a look at that and start in a different place. Start with something different.
Yeah, supposed
You know,
to, should.
yeah.
And I don't mean this to be a criticism of parents, teachers, people
Hmm.
who help through workshopping or anything else. Everybody has advice to give, and a lot of it is good advice. But writers who have not yet found the confidence to listen to themselves first and foremost, I think it's a little dangerous to be telling them what they should or shouldn't do.
I think we've seen an awful lot about what you value with your writing, and how what parts of the process you really like. What do you what do you love about your work? What's precious? Where are the darlings in there?
My metaphors.
Your
I
metaphors.
I love imagery. I love figurative language. It's so much fun to write, and I love reading it in other people's work. The characters. I mean, I love my protagonists. Those girls, my book daughters, are so important to me. I love spending time with them, and I'm very sad when I finish a book. I go through a mourning period where I don't get to spend time with them every day. And when the book goes out into the world, it's really like putting that kid on the school bus on the first day of school, sending them out into the great unknown. And that's hard to do too. I get very attached to them. So I love the writing process. I love trying to find the right words. I love discovering the story as it unfolds. I love getting to know my characters, and I love writing endings. I am a poet too. And so whenever I get a chance to write a passage that
Mm-hmm.
blends the sensory with the emotional and brings the character to some kind of new awareness or new place in her growth, I am overjoyed.
So Candle Island just came out. Would you like to give everybody a quick introduction for that?
Sure, sure. I happen to have the Australian paperback right here, which came out
Oh, lovely.
much faster than usually foreign folks do. But um, again, place is everything. It's set on a little island off the coast of Maine, which is a fictional island, but it was inspired by a number of islands I visited through the Island Readers and Writers, which is a foundation that supplies these tiny island schools and these remote inland schools in Maine with books and author visits and illustrated visits. These are schools no one would visit otherwise. They're tiny. But I love, love, love going to visit them. And so having spent time on these islands with these kids and realizing that these places are a little bit like Cape Cod in that in the winter, at least it used to be the case when I was a kid, everyone goes home, the locals remain, and it's a ghost town, and everything's quiet and peaceful and clean and calm. That's really not true anymore, but it was. And that's what happens on these islands. They are inundated in the summer with summer visitors, but then in the winter, the lobstering and the fishing and the business of everyday life goes on. In the summer, there is this often conflict between the summer people, the tourists, and the residents. Two different ways of life, two different sets of expectations, two different ways of behaving, clashing. When I started writing this book, and I only knew it was going to take place on an island, and that my protagonist, Lucretia, was going to be a new arrival. She and her mother are coming to this island to escape from something in their past, and also because they have a big secret they're taking with them. They get there, and they are neither with the islanders, even though they now live there, nor are they with the visitors. They are stuck in the middle, Lucretia especially. And so she's got this secret. She's got this thing that she and her mother are running from that is emotionally daunting, and she's trying to find her place. And she meets island kids and she meets summer kids. And what she does with these two different populations and how she finds her way on this island is at the heart of the story. It's also about animals. There are quite a few animals in it, and you can tell a lot about people by how they treat animals. And that's very, very true in this book. It's also about art. There is a lot of creativity in this book, and so it's got a lot of me in it. It's got a lot of who I am and what I love and problems that I would fix if I could.
I love hearing the story behind the story with this as well. I think that what was it? The Island Writers,
Readers and Writers is an
Island Readers and Writers.
wonderful organization.
Okay. Well, I'll try and drop a link in the show notes for that as well, because it sounds like a lovely idea for
It is. And some of these kids have never owned a book before. Their families have never owned a book before. There might be 2 kids in 6th grade in a class. There might be just a dozen kids in kindergarten through 7th grade. And so reading and feeling about books the way I do, is kind of new to them. And not reading, but having books in their lives. So Island Readers and Writers does everything possible to encourage these kids to be readers and writers. It's a great cause.
That is great. There are islands even in the landlocked areas. Even if regardless of this organization or just some, the school down the street or the kids who don't have the school. It's a worthy cause. Encourage the reading, the writing, join up, volunteer, donate some books.
Absolutely.
So for listeners who are really interested in your work, would like to find out more or explore some of these other things, like the film work with the Inkline project, where should people look for you?
My website has information. I've got an Instagram account. I'm on Facebook. I am no longer on Twitter or whatever they're calling it these days, for
Yeah,
reasons
we
that should
appreciate
be
that.
apparent to anyone. But yeah, I have a contact form on my website. Anyone who wants to write to me can do it that way. They can get in touch with my publisher. I do school visits. I speak at conferences. I travel a lot, and I love it. Love, love, love spending time with kids and educators, librarians and teachers, readers and writers of all ages. It's a blast to be part of this tribe of people who love the arts and understand that creativity is the antidote to destruction, and the more we create, the less we destroy. So hopefully people are out there making themselves and their lives better through, the arts.
There's our little resonating thought for everybody for the to end the story here. So, thank you once again for joining us and for giving us some excellent insights into the world of your stories and how you make them. I would point everybody to your favorite bookstores. Pick up a copy of some of the books that we've talked about. Even if you don't have kids, remember there is a lot, especially since, like we talked about, there's not a different story for kids than there is for adults.
If I could say to that, you're absolutely right. I meet with a lot of octogenarians whose lives they point to these books and they say, I remember those times. I remember those places, and I feel like these stories are mine as well.
Yes, absolutely. And it's there doesn't matter how old you are. Middle grade books have been popular because they're still just stories. So I'm going to be going out and picking up Candle Island, and sounds like there's a couple others that are going to have my name on it pretty soon here. Thank you once again, and I really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Michael, so much.
Readers come from many places, different paths of life, and every age. The fairy tales and adventure stories of our childhoods stay with us into adulthood. The most special thing about the stories is that they become part of ourselves, no matter how old we get. And the best thing you can do for your story or reader is to write the very best story you can. Thanks again to Lauren Wolk for this wonderful conversation. You can visit her website at laurenwolk.com to learn more about her books or to contact her. You can, of course, pick up a copy of any of her books at your favorite bookstore. You can also find links to her books in the show notes. The links go to bookshop.org to support independent bookstores. Clicking the links may also support this show in a small way. Also, in the show notes, I have added a link to the Island Readers and Writers organization that Lauren spoke about. Take a look at their site. Also, look up what local organizations may be in your area. If you are able, please consider supporting one of these organizations which helps support kids and the arts. Of course, one of the best ways to support the arts is to go out and make some. Thank you.